Hey guys, June here, and in this video I want to tackle one of the most commonly asked questions that I get, which is how do I learn full manual? No doubt this can be a daunting task at first if you're used to using Legacy Combat or Revolution, but with a few simple tricks and maybe a couple of hours of practice you should be pretty proficient at it in no time. As I've talked about in previous videos, Revolution isn't necessarily worse DPS, but you certainly need to have the control of manual in order to do some of the more advanced tanking roles in game like bomb tanking at Virago or base tanking at Yakamaru. Even if you aren't interested in learning any of those more difficult roles though, I strongly recommend that you learn how to use full manual and at least give it a shot, because honestly it's so much more engaging and fun to use during PVM than Legacy or Revolution. So let's take a look at the first trick for helping us get acquainted with manual. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but there is tons of similarity between the way different abilities function between different styles. This first trick is that we want to organize our ability bars in such a way so that regardless of which style we're using, we know a specific keybind is going to be associated with a specific response. Just for a few examples, in the second slot I keep the 157% damage ability that has a 5-second cooldown. For those of you who have watched my guide for thinking about ability rotations, this kind of forms the backbone structure of ability rotations, and so I want to keep it in the same slot on all the bars, so regardless of which style I'm using, I know that that is the key for that particular response. Hurricane, Snapshot, and Wild Magic behave almost identically, dealing 2 high damage hits and a single global cooldown, so I like to put those in the same slot on my ability bar as well. Obviously, each style has a damage-boosting ultimate, so we can put those in the same slots. Each style has a 3-second cooldown ability that deals boosted damage against stunned enemies, so we can put those in the same slots, and so on and so forth for all of the other abilities. Once we've matched all those abilities up, there's only a couple of slots left, and it should feel pretty natural which abilities would go in those individual slots. Just as an example, Magic and Ranged both have a Corruption ability, but Melee doesn't, and so Cleave fits very naturally into that spot. By matching our abilities up in this fashion, we make sure that any experience we gain and any muscle memory that we build with any particular attack style translates very naturally into the other attack styles, and so we don't need to individually learn how to use each of our attack styles' ability bars separately. For any defensive abilities or other actions we may want to keybind, we should open up secondary bars to put those actions on, since there's really no PVM situation where you would ever want to lose access to your primary DPS bar. Next, we need to plan what our keybinds are going to be, and I'm not going to lie, this mostly comes down to personal preference and how much experience you have using those keybinds, but there are a few general guidelines that can really help you get acquainted with them quickly. First off, it's good to have a set of 4 home keys where each of your 4 fingers is going to sit for the majority of the time, from which you will reach for your other keybinds. This not only keeps you from having to look away from the screen while you're first getting acquainted with the keybinds, but since your hand is always going to be in the same spot, it ensures that every time you're reaching for a specific keybind, the motion that you're making is going to be identical, and the muscle memory that you build is going to be much stronger and much more consistent as a result. Just to use as an example for the continuation of this discussion, I use the keybinds S, D, F, and G as my home keys, and you can see that on screen now. From there, the rest of my standard DPS bar is keybound as shown, so that at most for any particular action the farthest that I'm going to need to reach from my home keys is only 2 keys away. From there I can pull up a second bar and bind some defensives to the right, to the left, and the underside of my home keys, and this ensures that even though I have up to 28 different actions keybound here, I'm still only having to reach a maximum of 2 keys for any action. Overall, deciding what keybinds you're going to use is probably the most difficult part of getting acquainted with full manual, and so my suggestion would be to experiment, use these basic guidelines, try to minimize the amount that you need to reach from your home keys, and just test out some different scenarios. Different people will naturally be comfortable with different things, and so you have to find what's right for you. Next up, we need to get some actual experience using these keybinds to build up that muscle memory, and we're going to do it in a few stages. Your first step should be to head to the Lumbridge dummies and spend 10 to 15 minutes just practicing your ability rotations. This is the perfect place to start, since they have infinite HP. You don't have to worry about swapping between monsters, running around, or anything other than simply using your abilities appropriately. Once you're acquainted enough with your keybinds to do consistent ability rotations at dummies, pull them into a real combat scenario. Obviously, you still want something that's going to be very low danger, so depending on your level and gear, this could be anything from different Slayer tasks up through maybe Raptor Slayer mobs, or low-level bosses like God War's Dungeon, King Black Dragon, or anything like that. This will help continue to build that same kind of muscle memory that we were building at dummies, but it's not mind-numbingly boring, and you might even start to have a little fun depending on what boss you chose. From there, you can move on to progressively more difficult bosses as you feel comfortable, but there is one final stage that will help you get acquainted with your defensive ability keybinds, as well as prepare you for any kind of a tank role you might want to do at Raze or Virago, for example. This is Hellweir, and he offers a really great opportunity to get used to those keybinds and work with a consistent defensive ability rotation while also really not being all that dangerous. We can use either a defender or a shield, and our objective will generally be to use resonance to heal back from the You Will Bleed attack, and then we'll want to capitalize on the revenge ability to stack some extra damage from the bleed that incurs. Then we can alternate using several different abilities and getting used to them to deal with the damage from his frenzy attacks, such as Devotion and Melee Prayer. We could use Reflect, we could use Barricade, we could use Debilitate, or anything like that. An hour of this should put you in a great spot to learning tank rolls, and it's also a lot of fun and pretty great money too. By this point in the progression, it's a safe bet to say that you're probably well acquainted enough with your ability rotations to move on to pretty much anything, so you could take this to pet tanking or base tanking at raids, or just about anything else that you see fit. Thank you guys as always for watching. Hopefully this video helped you get past the initial learning curve of full manual and got you to be more interactive and have a little bit more fun with the PVM environment in RuneScape. As usual, if you like this video, make sure you rate, comment, subscribe, and if you got any questions, drop them down below. I do my best to answer everything from everybody. So I'll see you guys in the next video.